Hello, my name is Winslaya and welcome to my video going over my 10 general tips for playing on the new content that we're getting in the Thrones of Blood expansion and the free Gargoyle update for Age of Wonders 4, both of which are coming out on November 11th. Big thank you to Paradox Interactive and Triumph Studios for sending me a free influencer key for Age of Wonders 4 Thrones of Blood. I've been working a lot on this video and I'm very excited to share my insights with you all. My first tip is to attach as many mines to your cities as possible when playing the new Elder Vampire Ruler, and that is mostly because you can get a lot of Imperium at the third level of Renown. If you look here, it says I get +2 Imperium per mine, which means these 3 mines are giving me an extra +6 Imperium, which is generally very useful at all stages of the game. You need Imperium to make cities, and you also need Imperium to unlock Empire skills, and sometimes it can be hard to know if you should try to get a Empire skill a little bit earlier, or if you should try and set up a city a little bit earlier. Having that extra Imperium means you don't really have to make as many of those choices as often as you would in a normal playthrough, and it also means that you can afford to expand your city using this button a little bit more often. I know a lot of people would say never click this button, but by getting that extra Imperium as early as I have here means I can actually afford to do that, to say get my guys a little bit of extra healing. If I wanted to step them into an adjacent space to get some healing, it could be worthwhile to expand the city over here, and that will allow them to keep clearing as efficiently as possible. The way I was able to get to Renown level 3 as quickly as I did is I took an underground start, and that gave me excavation, which made the Delver ambition quite good. There's also the privateer ambition, which you can generally clear about as quickly as I have with the Delver one on maps that have a lot of water, but not all maps have a lot of water, whereas most maps, so long as you don't specify that you want like a limited underground, will have a lot of underground space that you can take advantage of this interaction. Another nice thing about being underground is that the vampires want to be where there is no sun. If they are above ground, there's a good chance that they're going to be able to not regenerate, and they deal 20% less damage. So being underground has that nice synergy of making it so that your ruler is more efficient and you can get access to a lot of mines underground. My next tip is to use these lost souls to spawn in quests, which will give you access to extra fights and make it so that you can get extra experience on your units, your heroes, and your ruler. Unfortunately, my ruler can't make it to this fight this turn, but if we go ahead and trigger it right now, we'll see that this is actually a fairly difficult fight. It's got a tier 4 unit, a tier 1 hero, and a few other higher tier units. So fighting them earlier on can be risky, but there's a lot of experience here that you can get on your units. As you can see, this guy ranked up, these 2 ranked up, and he's awfully close to ranking up. So I recommend taking on those fights as early as possible, specifically if you have the Shadow Empire skill that gives you extra knowledge for defeating heroes, because those Lost Soul quests spawn in heroes, which basically means you can get 3 turns of research whenever you take out those fights. And there is one that spawns in a fight after a fight after a fight, which is quite nice because that can mean you can get a lot of extra knowledge on your empire fairly early in the game. Of course, not all of them work the same way. This one can give you renown, which is not very useful if you've already maxed out your renown track, but on turn 11 here, we haven't even done that. We're fairly close to maxing out the renown. I haven't been able to find a lot of provinces to excavate around my starting city past the initial ones. If we go here, we can see there's this one all the way up here, but there's nothing near there that we want. Whereas over here, where we're moving towards, that does have more things for us to excavate. So that's where I'm trying to move my ruler in order to complete his ambition. But there's going to be more things to excavate, so we may as well have this guy start with this one while my ruler is still making their way over. As I mentioned earlier, there's this other Lost Soul quest that spawns in a fight after a fight after a fight. And while these fights are fairly tricky, I did find that I was able to get a lot of experience on my ruler by just taking on these fights in quick succession. As you can see here, there was a ruler and some fairly high tier units. I did lose a unit, but we get some nice rewards for clearing out this fight. We can take gold, knowledge, or stability. And if you're trying to take on fights, you may want the gold to build more units. And as you can see here, we get another quest with another stack of units that are fairly strong. So we're going to want to make our way over towards them and take on that fight as soon as possible, while trying to make sure that we have the units to take it out. So I would recommend you get like another protector, you summon in a unit to make that fight a little bit easier next turn. But yeah, it's fairly powerful. Unfortunately, I did not have the Shadow Affinity to get the knowledge extraction that I had on the other playthrough, but I got this nice quest chain that is going to reward me for taking on fights, so I still think it's generally worthwhile. My next tip is to focus skill points on the vampire skills because they are generally quite powerful. As you can see here, you can give your Siphon Blood +2 range. It starts off as range 3, but with +2 range, you can hit units that are quite far away from your ruler with a skill that eventually has the ability to mind control enemies or even dominate them, which will allow you to keep the unit after combat. If we look at this tag, we'll see that you have to spend mana in order to keep those units, whereas the lower tier level of this will only make it so that they become friendly to you for 3 turns during the combat, and then afterwards you can't keep them. But the alternative is that they are just stunned. So generally that is very useful. Being able to take actions away from the enemy that is reasonably close to your ruler means that you should be able to kill them relatively quickly. And if you don't get this done, you're getting something better. You're getting something that will allow you to take enemy actions and make them something that's useful to you. It is worth noting that you can get access to this mind control ability quite early in the game. I was able to get to level 4 by turn 6 in this playthrough, and I was able to get to level 4 by turn 8 on that other playthrough we were just looking at. And that means that you can, if you want to, spend all of your points going down this path and having that ability to mind control, as well as one other point that you can spend on something else. So you could get the extra range, you could get this Drain Familiar ability, which makes your vampire ruler get extra HP or temporary HP back. And if you are having trouble regenerating HP, that can be very helpful in fights. And there's also some nice interactions further down this tree where it will give regeneration to the unit that you use Drain Familiar on. This is something that has to target friendly units, so hurting your own friendly units for 20 damage can be kind of bad, but not unless but it's not necessarily true. That could be okay if you're able to regenerate that HP back before the enemy can engage your units. There's also the ability to turn your Draining Bite into a charge attack in here, which is kind of nice. And the Vampiric Flight will give your unit flying movement, fast movement, and evasion to physical range and magic attacks. All of these things are generally quite good. Mist Away is something that is going to be, I think, quite popular in multiplayer because that means you don't need Slip Away on your gear. You can just get access to that in the vampire skill tree. But of course, there are other things that you may want to spend your points on in the class skill trees that are also quite valuable, and you can get a little bit earlier than this Mist Away ability. My next tip is to use the Hex Pact from the Warlock class as early as possible. You can get this once you get to level 2, which you can do on the first turn of the game, and I highly recommend you actually take that before going down the vampire skill tree because of the value that you get out of an ability that is a free action, can target enemies that are 8 hexes away, gives them Misfortune, Sundered Resistance, and Sundered Defense on a 2-turn cooldown, meaning Once you've applied this, you should be able to kill the enemy unit fairly easily, and then you should be able to reapply it to other enemies fairly quickly as well. If we look further down this tree, you'll see that Hex Pact can make enemies suffer -10 morale each turn. That's massive. You might get some enemies to rout before they even get close enough to engage your army, which is super nice. And also there's abilities that give your magic attacks and debuff abilities the ability to inflict misfortune. Very powerful ability because it makes it so enemies have a 15% chance to fumble with each stack of misfortune, and they can take 8 physical damage when they fumble, meaning not only will their damage output be reduced by the fumble, but they will end up hurting themselves instead of dealing damage to you. That will really make certain combats swing quite heavily in your favor. And if we look over here at the draining bite and siphon blood abilities, these count as magic attacks, meaning they get the fate magic buff attached to them as well. I wouldn't recommend you go down the Warlock path this far before getting things like the mind control ability that we talked about in the previous tip, but the Warlock class just has a lot of synergies with the new vampire interactions, and generally speaking, it was very popular in multiplayers because of this interaction of being able to target units that are 8 whole hexes away from your ruler. So keep that in mind when you're building out your vampire rulers. And like I said, highly recommend that you use the Warlock class with your main ruler, specifically so that they have access to Hex Pact. There are some other nice things like Claim Soul further down the right side of this tree, but I think in general people will prefer the vampire skills over what you get out of this side of the Warlock tree, but I don't know. Feel free to correct me in the comment section if you disagree. My next tip is to use the Cult of Death subculture from Dark with the Tome of Necromancy to farm the map very efficiently. I also found I really liked using the Ritual Cannibals Society trait and the Ruthless Raiders Society trait because when I take out enemy units, I get extra gold and draft, and I get extra mana and food so long as those enemies are not magic origin, and I can even get extra mana and food when I lose my own units in combat, which isn't going to happen too often if you're bringing in a lot of units from other fights. If you kill off enemies that are humanoid, like this stack over here, will be able to turn them into skeletons, which will allow us to just keep snowballing the power that we already have. As you can see here, I can actually keep this unit because my hero was able to mind control him, and sure, we can take another unit. That guy's probably going to die because puppies tend to die quite a bit. We don't have the souls needed to keep this unit, but if I take on a few more fights, we'll be able to build up that stockpile pretty quickly and get to the point where we can bring in more skeletons. I also really like the spell that you get from the Tome of Necromancy. The Necrotize here allows you to take out enemy units faster, then it will spawn in a decaying zombie, which will generally get targeted by enemies because they are something that will die a little bit more easily than your actual units, and that is just generally very nice. There's also this new immortal unit that gets resurgence at I think it just starts with this lesser resurgence. You don't even need to rank up your units to get access to that resurgence interaction. And then once you get your skeletons, I think baseline skeletons come with resurgence once they get to champion rank. And yeah, even these thorned guys, they get resurgence. They get a proper resurgence at champion rank right here. It's going to let me look at it, right? Yeah, we get a full proper resurgence here, which means they come back with 50% of their hit points if they die in combat. That's quite nice. That should allow you to keep snowballing across the map very quickly and very efficiently. My next tip is to get road building as early as possible. This will allow you to move across the map more efficiently and take on more fights than you otherwise would. As you can see here, it only costs 3 gold per hex that you build a road on. And if we were to try and move these guys in this general direction to engage a fight, they wouldn't be able to reach it without road building. I'm only going to send 1 unit up this way, and I will have him build roads the whole way so that this army can actually get within reinforcement range pretty quickly, pretty easily, and I will make it so that it's more likely to go well by bringing a full 6 stack in that, and we'll have this ranged unit engage the army here. There are gargoyles, so yeah, I had a feeling we might lose a unit, but we got 18 gold and we got some experience on our units. We even got 1 experience on our ruler that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to get this turn. And then there is the fact that when you clear out this node, you get a reward as well. We get 71 gold. So this is a net profit for sending our units in this general direction, and we'll be able to send this guy to other fights if we enable road building. He won't be able to get close enough to engage this stack with everything that he has, but if we just take these units, we can get within reinforcement range there by having them go here, and we'll have this guy just this guy actually, because I think he's going to die. I know how puppies work. They generally don't survive fights either. Oh, we actually lost this unit instead, which is acceptable. We are going to get a bit of gold for our society, and we get a little bit of mana for clearing out that, which means we can afford to bring in more magic origin units. We can actually use souls to get more units now. And since this stack has a extra space available for a unit, we can bring him over here and this guy over here before having this guy build a road over to this fight. And we're almost able to get him into Emberkeep this turn, which is pretty good. In general, it's nice to get those attached to your cities as quickly as possible. And look at that, we got a nice ice spider, which is a very good unit. That's much better than the other one we were looking at. I'm just going to raise this guy so that we have more units in the near future. And if we really, really wanted to, we can have this ice spider engage this stack right now, which why not? We're showing off how you can get more fights more quickly if you use road building. So we'll take on one last fight before moving on to the next tip. My next tip is to use the Elder Vampire signature skills to summon in units that will allow you to clear the map more efficiently. Having 7 units in a fight versus 6 units can be very nice, and the units that you summon in tend to be fairly weak, so they get targeted by enemies, and that means that you keep the real damage off of your real units, which should allow you to take on other fights a little bit quicker. If we look here, Knight Sworn will summon in a Doombat, and Desecrator will summon in a zombie, but that doesn't work on water combats, so you may want to stay away from Desecrator if you're going to be trying to farm water nodes. But in general, I really, really like these abilities, and I think they are a little bit more powerful than the other signature skills a champion or a wizard king would get access to. Dragon Lords have a separate tracker, same with Eldritch Sovereigns and the Giant King rulers, but in general, they get access to really nice signature skills and cannot get access to transformations as a result. If we look over here, we do have Earthkin and Virtuous Spirits on our starting faction, but we don't have those tags on our ruler, which is absolutely okay because they're very strong and would be incredibly powerful with those extra things that your ruler will get access to. Turn vampires are different. They don't get access to the special Elder Vampire signature skills, but they do get the transformations. It's a really interesting trade-off that they have for this ruler type. Now, if we take a closer look at the other options, this is okay. It's not bad because it can help you get temporary HP on a unit that might not be able to heal itself very easily on the map. But once again, like we talked about earlier, if you're underground or in the new sunless terrain, you will be able to regenerate. So this isn't nearly as good. Being able to play Torment and take away enemy morale is very nice, specifically if you pair it with the Hex of Broken Spirit that we talked about earlier. But yeah, in general, I think I like this one slightly more than Desecrator. Desecrator's pretty cool. It's like Dark Sacrament will make it so that you can kill off enemies a little bit more efficiently, but the Doombat is just going to be available in more combats in general, and I am a pretty big fan of farming the water nodes. I really like Profane Body Mastery because of the ability to get very fast movement. That means that your ruler doesn't have to stay with your stacks that are moving across the map, and they can actually be the one to engage the fight, allowing the others to get to other fights a little bit more easily. The extra evasion and HP is incredibly good, and I generally do find myself taking Unholy Leader once I get to my level 8 signature skill. If you look across the board here, all of them give Unholy Leader, so you're kind of supposed to bring some undead units with your vampire, things like the skeletons, or if you want to, you can Whiteborn your faction, and then they'll get an extra HP, damage, fire resistance, and spirit damage. Things that are undead have weakness to fire and spirit damage. So that kind of like shores up their shortcomings while also making them better units across the board. And then, of course, once you get to the level 12, there's some really nice stuff in here. But I think Exsanguinate is my favorite because that's a lot of damage from a fairly good range. 6 range is a fairly large range for you to be able to do a ranged attack that is this powerful. It just will apply 3 bleeding, and then it also has the magic tag, the debuff tag, and single shot tag, which is how I was able to get the extra accuracy and Mire Crocodile boon on this ability. It's cooldown 2, which is fairly low for such a powerful ability. And I want to say, if I win a couple more fights, we might even get a chance to look at the level 16 skills here. Oh boy, look at that. There's a level up. Could have gone right down here and gotten that level up, which now means we have access to these upgrades. Some of them are specifically tied to what you've taken before. I want to say because we took Exsanguinate, now we have an upgraded Exsanguinate we can choose from, or these 3 other options, which are all quite good. I think in general, having extra units is the best one to pick. So I'm going to say I like Rosebound Noble more than these other ones, but maybe other people have other opinions they'd like to share in the comment section below. Please feel free to. And yeah, let's move on to the next tip. My next tip is to use powerful transformations with the new Painbringer mythic unit. My understanding is that it is the only mythic unit that can get transformations, meaning if you plan out your tome path, you can make your Painbringers very powerful. And what I did on this playthrough is I went for Earthkin and Virtuous Spirit, and I'm working towards some other ones like the Geomantic Crystallization. One thing I noticed when I was going for the Geomantic Crystallization is that this is an Astral Materium affinity tome, which makes it kind of tricky to pair with the tome that the Painbringers are in. If we go to my tome library, we can see that I have the Tome of Torment, which is where the Painbringers are from. This is a Shadow Affinity tome, and I noticed after playing through this that I didn't have any Shadow Affinity because I was trying to get to the Tome of Geomancy. I really like the idea of Geomantic Crystallization on Painbringers and really any unit, because making them elemental means they are immune to bleeding, and a lot of things in this expansion rely on targets being able to bleed for abilities to go through. If we just take a second to look at my ruler, his special Siphon Blood cannot target units that are immune to bleeding. So being able to get this transformation on your units is very, very nice. But there's some other things that you can work towards instead of geomantic crystallization, like the draconic transformation and the gifts of the old blood, which is also from a new tome, which is the Tome of the Crimson Rain. Tome of the Crimson Rain has dual affinities. It's both chaos and shadow, which is similar to the torment in that Tome of Torment is a shadow affinity, making the gift of the old blood a natural choice for people who already have the Painbringer. This will give you the Life Drinker ability, and it will make it so that you have the ability to inflict the Blood Parasite, which is very good because it creates units when enemies die with this tag, and that will just make it so that it's harder for enemies to attack the real units. And I find that as I mentioned earlier, the Draconic transformation is really nice because it gives you natural regeneration and the ability to do more damage once a unit takes damage. Since the Painbringer is a melee unit, it has melee attacks and a little physical ranged attack and a shadow step, it's more likely to take damage. So being able to regenerate that HP is very nice, and being able to deal more damage once this unit has taken damage is also very nice. I think Virtuous Spirit is amazing. It comes from a tier 2 tome, so it's something that you can access very early on. It reduces the penalty from losing casualties, but not only that, it has this trigger that gives you extra defense and resistance once you've lost 60% of your HP, which if we look over here at the Draconic Rage tag, that also triggers when you drop below 60% HP. This guy has a lot of HP, so there's a fairly good chance that you can trigger that fairly quickly. And just it pairs really, really nicely with everything else that this unit does. And once again, if you're going to be going for Tome of Torment, you're probably going to get access to the Painbound transformation, which will make it so that when you hit an enemy, that this unit gains morale and a random positive stats effect. That's very, very powerful. My next tip is to use more ethereal units and elemental units. As we discussed in a previous tip, the elementals are immune to bleeding, which means not only can enemy vampire rulers not target them with Siphon Blood, you can also walk over this new terrain foliage, which will spread across the map and apply bleeding to units who walk across it. If we look at my ruler, he can actually have bleed applied to him, so you wouldn't say want to go down this path if you had any other choice. But these ethereal units, they are not just immune to bleeding, they are immune to immobilized, diseased, and poisoning on top of that, but have a pretty big weakness to spirit damage, which was kind of a focus of the other DLCs that we've seen before Thrones of Blood. There was, I think, the Archon Prophecy, which gave you access to more spirit damage and really nice order tomes that would allow you to deal with ethereal units a little bit more easily. But yeah, this guy, he is also immune to the bleeding tag, which makes him about as good at dealing with these special locations with the new rose vines and dealing with enemy rulers who are using the new elder vampire interactions. I'm not sure if we're going to see a lot of people using the rock elemental because of the affinities that are associated with it not being tied to either chaos or the shadow affinity, which are giant parts of this specific DLC. There are a lot of units that are ethereal and elemental in the shadow tome path, like the Cryomancy gives you access to the ice elementals, and then if you, I think, get Doom Herald, you can get access to the the Banshee unit, which is ethereal, but I do find this unit to be pretty good. I like the fact that you can immobilize guys and then kind of make them sit still and potentially take damage from other units' AoEs. I don't think this guy's going to be able to do nearly... Oh, no, he can get far enough forward to use his burning. So now we got them stuck in in terrain that's burning. And yeah, since he applied that burning there, it's very dangerous for my ruler to try and walk through this now. If he does, he's going to take a lot of bleeding and burning stacks unnecessarily. My next tip is to use the Mire Crocodile subculture for Primal to get access to a very useful SPI when playing as the new Elder Vampire Governor. The Elder Vampire will create thralls using food production, and as you can see here, you only need 120 food to create a new thrall. I'm making 230 food per turn. I'm almost creating 2 thralls per turn, which is a lot. It really is a lot of food production when you compare that to other factions. A big part of that is coming from the fact that I'm getting 33 food off of this SPI, but I also have a tome that gives me the Herbalist, giving us another 22 food production. And if we look closer at my faction, I have Druidic Terraformers, which gives you plus 20% food if you've got swamps in the center of your province, which Crocodiles just have. And I also took Mana Channelers, which is a big part of how I was able to get so many elementals up to legend ranked on turn 61. The tier 3 ones came from tier 1 units that I evolved, which will be easier if you have the Mana Channelers tag, because you get 20% extra experience on magic origin units, which those elemental summons are. But another nice thing that we have in this combination is we're going to be able to use the special vampire thrall spells more often. If we want to, we can heal up our vampires for 50% of their HP. That's a lot of HP for a single spell. Or your non-vampire units can get 20% of their HP back. That will allow you to move across the map a lot more efficiently. You won't have to wait nearly as long for people, or for your units rather, to regenerate their HP, and you won't lose nearly as many units because of units just, dying and running out of HP. We also have the Vivisection Ritual, which is really good. And not only does it deal damage to enemy stacks, making those fights go better for you, you're going to get 150 knowledge. The biggest thing that I noticed after using this interaction is that this is a lot of casting points. 150 casting points is quite a bit of casting points to get 150 knowledge, but I still think it's worth taking every once in a while. But of course, you may want to be using your casting points on this Desecration Ritual, which is very powerful. Being able to turn a province into sunless means that you can regenerate there, and you also will be able to get more damage out of your vampire and turn vampire units. This can apply to all the enemy. This damage that we see here, the 20 frost damage, that will apply to all enemy units in that province. So that's a very, very nice, powerful spell. And then, of course, we have this capstone spell, the Blood Moon Ritual, which will make it so that your vampires don't suffer from that sunlight weakness that keeps you from regenerating, and it also keeps you from dealing as much damage as you possibly could. And then there's also the fact that you will regenerate more HP on the world map, meaning you won't have to spend thralls and casting points on this blood transfer ritual once you get to the higher level spells like the Blood Moon Ritual. There's also the fact that you get extra 20% damage and +2 resistance on your vampires from this spell. And this lasts 10 world map turns. That's a really, really long time. Of course, that's supposed to be a lot of thralls, but if you go for this general strategy, 12 thralls isn't too much when you compare it to my stockpile of 57 thralls. And the other thing that you need to make this interaction work is you need to build some infrastructure in your cities. You're going to need the thing that's like the wizard tower. The vampire castle will provide you the spells that we were just looking at different levels. At level 2, you get the blood transfer ritual. That's the healing one. At level 3, you get the desecration ritual. That's the terraforming one that deals damage to enemy armies. And then at level 4, you get the blood moon ritual. And yeah, that's everything I had for you today. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.